Welcome to the show. I just realized I grabbed your drink from the...
Oh, I'll take it.
From the refrigerator and not mine, so I will not open that. That is yours.
I appreciate it. I'm gonna walk over and grab that.
Okay, cool. So today on the show, we are going to talk about Griselda, the TV series that was just done with Sofia Vergara, and also the real life cocaine grandmother. The TV series is called Griselda 2024, and it's fantastic, and Sophia is fantastic, and Kathy will gush about that in a moment. And then the real life cocaine grandmother, Griselda Blanco.
Wow, this whole series was a tough one. I mean, it was so well done, but you had to watch it in chunks.
Yeah, I remember a few months ago I watched it and I was like, oh, Kathy, you got to watch it.
I remember when you reported on it.
And so then I was like, well, this is right up our alley. Why don't I just schedule it as an episode? I kind of, when I see things that work, I put it on the list. And so I hope you enjoyed it. I mean,
I did. Like I said, it's really tough material because it's incredibly violent and it's raw. And I think we aren't used to seeing women in this level of
psychopathy
and just these positions, right?
Yeah.
Of like
underworld positions of power.
And she by far was like a cult leader,
Let me just talk about that just a little bit. Griselda Blanco Restrepo was a Colombian drug lord, and she was mostly the cocaine drug trade and part of the Colombian drug underworld of Miami during the 1970s through the early 2000s. And she ultimately was with her pregnant daughter-in-law. They went into a butcher shop and they came out, and an assassin on a motorcycle shot her twice in the head, killing her. She had assassinated... It mimicked her assassination style throughout the years, and so that is how she died. And they've just done this really great series called Griselda, and it was great. They also did a crime drama film with Catherine Zeta-Jones in 2017 called Cocaine Grandmother, and that's what they always called Griselda. That's how she's known. And if you look at pictures of the real Griselda, she does not look like Sofia Vergara.
No, I was watching
I love Hollywood. But.
I was reading an article with Michael Corleone. He's the last and the only living son. He was like, I don't like that they gave her this like weird jaw and nose to make her look more like a drug dealer.
Oh,
he's like, because it didn't really look like my mom.
Yeah.
I guess he at first was very anti this whole thing, and then through the process of it and stuff, appreciated it or whatever. But and I would imagine it would have been really hard to watch.
Mm-hmm. I liked how they really made her a real person, and I obviously don't know if she was anything like how they portrayed her, but they gave you the flavor. This miniseries gave you the flavor of her love for her children and the people in her life, and then how she could immediately prioritize herself and the business and the brutality that it required.
The compartmentalization was insane.
Yeah, like you could be in one scene where she's hugging on her kid or putting them first, making them a priority, getting them to safe places or whatever. But it was never about making the relationship with them a priority. It was about how they were to be controlled as well. Like,
yes. No, it was never about them. I mean, she was protective over them. There's no doubt there. But yeah,
that's different.
They were an excuse for her addiction.
Absolutely. And she had, so just to let you know, she had 3 husbands and 4 children. She was the major caregiver for these kids, from what I could tell. She grew up in Colombia, and her mother moved away, I guess, when she was, or moved to like the south of the country when she was like 3. And this is how she originally was exposed to a criminal lifestyle like when she was just growing up. I imagine if she had stayed where she was, it wouldn't have worked out that way. But the socioeconomic area that they moved to, I think it's called Medellín, which is ultimately where she lived and died. This is where all of that stuff was happening. I guess one of her former lovers talks about how she recounted that at the age of 11, she was allegedly kidnapped and attempted to ransom and ultimately shot a child from an upscale neighborhood near her home. Like there was all this folklore about her when she was young. She was a pickpocket when she was a teenager. She was sexually abused by her mother's boyfriend. She ran away when she was like 18 or 19, and she lived off of thieving. And it's speculated that she engaged in prostitution. And I think that the TV series kind of addresses a little bit of that and in those first few episodes. And then we get into the part where she's a crime lord.
It's just that.
Yep. And they really do. I mean, this goes along with kind of what we do because she has female psychopathic tendencies. They choose to have this kind of empowered female arc, which, I mean, she's an awful person. Like, let's not romanticize this. She did a lot of awful things and was part of a criminal underworld and all of that. And this TV series, because Sophia is amazing, they give her this arc of female empowerment where she's like the only chick in this all, dude industry, obviously, and how she has to break in and how she has to be really brutal in order to make a name for herself and for them to respect her. And the series kind of takes the perspective that she's never really truly respected and that she has to keep reaggressing in order to be respected. I would argue that men in that world have to do that too.
Yeah, I think it's different though.
Of course it's different.
Yeah.
How is it different?
Well, because it's a male-dominated industry for one, and especially if you add cultural components and machismo and things, that women are prescribed a certain role in that culture, which is to be a caretaker and to, take care of the family and to cook and to clean and do all these things. And here she is stepping into a very masculine position, expecting to be taken seriously. So I think men are inherently taken seriously in most of these. Now, they still have to gain a level of respect and they're still putting their lives at risk, but you're double downing when you are another gender because this was not their place. This was not her place.
Well, it's the 70s too.
And the 70s.
And she had a bunch of kids. And so, I don't know. She's an interesting person though.
Sorry, real quickly too.
Yeah,
I think where she also used her femaleness as a protective factor or an advantage, because I think there is that too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is that she had a few men who had a deep desire to rescue her, care for her, and put their lives on the line for that. Mm-hmm. And one could arguably say that a male in that position would not have that. So I do think that she used that motherly, and again, I'm going by the series, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
She used that to her advantage as well. When she was arguing with the most recent husband she had before she died, the one who ran off with their son, it was just like everything was around her being a mother and how dare you take my child. She played that card quite a bit. And she had men sacrificing themselves for her. And there were a couple of them in there that down to the very end gave their lives for her. And I don't know. And obviously, yes, we will see men do that for men in these situations if there is something to gain or if they're fearful of that person. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that, these last couple of guys were necessarily fearful. One of them was even like, I imagine we were lovers in another life. Like at the end of the day, he was in love with her.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great point because genders, bring something to the table. They're a huge part of our identity and such. And so if we're looking at her female gender and representation, she used all those things like you're saying. And she also has because of the way was socialized as a female and where she lived and everything. She was socialized to use all of those things. Like girls often become pickpockets. They often become thieves because they're not suspected of doing those things. And so you can be under the radar a bit like that. And then they often use prostitution. They often use the men to represent as if the man is in charge when they're really the one in charge, because that will help further the business. So when she first started, it was with her first husband, and they started a marijuana dealing enterprise in Colombia. And then she got divorced from him in 1964 and illegally entered the United States with fake documentation under like a different name. And she ended up settling in Queens, New York with 3 children with her second husband, who was a cocaine smuggler for the Medellín cartel. And this is kind of shown, most of this in the series. And they end up setting up a drug operation in New York City. Unfortunately for them, 9 years later in like 1975, Blanco was identified by the authorities and indicted on federal drug charges, which is drug conspiracy charges, I think it was, along with 30 of her people. And so then they fled to Colombia to avoid conviction. And then later in the 70s, I guess she returned to the United States and started a new operation in Miami. So that was and that is all, they go through all of that in the series. They dramatize, I should say, all of those kind of moves and the drama entailed in why she moved and how she moved and, getting indicted and all of that. And so then she returns to Miami to set up drugs there. They decide, okay, we're going back. We're going to go to Miami and do this. And her return there coincided with a bunch of violence there, basically, and a lot of homicides. And the Metro Miami area in the 1980s was there was a drug war going on. So they were sort of coming right into that. And this was like a period where, for those of you who are familiar with like current drug culture, this was a period where cocaine was the thing. So that's not necessarily the case where you are at the moment.
Right.
But, this was a period when cocaine was very, very lucrative. It was very expensive, and it was trafficked more than marijuana.
Right.
And the struggle by law enforcement to end this in Miami, they created this CENTAC 26, the like Central Tactical Unit, with the Miami-Dade Enforcement Police and the DEA and all of this. And so then that led ultimately to her arrest in 1985, because she was, of course, known as a drug lord. And a lot of that is what the series bulks out as.
Yep.
We could talk about how she had 4 husbands and 4 kids and blah, 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 like all that stuff. Kind of a secondary through line is sort of the like men in her life.
Well, it just builds, I think, her character complexity, right? By adding all the contextual pieces in there and all the people that were affected.
Absolutely. Let's do a few. My understanding is that you have some
Grizzly facts with girl.
Grizzy. Instead of Griselda or anything like really masculine, like,
Grizzy facts with Kath.
We got Grizzy. We're going to call her Grizzy.
Grizz. Old Grizz. That's what they called Clark Griswold. Hey, Grizz.
Oh, that's right.
Run into the living room and grab my stogie. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Number 1, other than the Godmother, what was Blanco known as? Excuse me, what was Grizzy known as?
Okay. Yeah.
Who said the only man I was ever afraid of was a woman named Griselda Blanco?
Yeah.
Blanco's only surviving son, Michael Corleone Blanco, lost blank family members to the drug wars.
Oh, boy. All of them?
Number 4, what skill did Sofia Vergara have to learn to play Griselda? And then number 5, the show was originally titled Blank, a reference to something that held a significance in the show. There was a scene that they were going to name it after this one word.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I want to also just mention something about, I looked into a little bit of her character and her becoming
Sure.
Griselda, and she was so worried about people seeing Gloria from Modern Family. If you watch it again, knowing some of these things about what she did. So for example, she changed her entire posture and gait, and it's a very odd walk. And it was so harsh on her body that she ended up having to go to a physical therapist or a chiropractor because she had messed up her back so much in playing this character because she was so self-conscious about coming across as Gloria. So she spent so much time not only studying, the real person, but also creating this character that people could suspend this disbelief because she's, Gloria Pritchett to everybody in America that watched Modern Family, which is such a tropey and fun character. I mean, she's my mother. My mother's Puerto Rican, not Colombian, but she reminds me so much of my mother, her temperament and everything. And so she completely transformed that. You don't see Gloria at all in this. You see a very complex character that has many layers. And I just thought she was wonderful. I actually just watched Chef last night, and I forgot that
I love that movie.
She's awesome in that too. I mean, that's a great movie.
It's a nice palate cleanser after
this. It's a nice palate cleanser. I'm like, I need to see her in something a little bit lighter. But yeah, I just thought that was really cool. I like I said to you before we started recording today, I really hope she gets the Emmy for this because this was a transformative role.
She was really fantastic.
She also talked about the importance of bringing a lot of these South American actors into the industry where they can start to really show their acting chops. And she was like very happy about being able to offer these roles to real South American actors and not using Americans in their place or whatever.
Absolutely.
A lot of these folks were straight from Colombia.
There's a lot of authenticity in this series, and I think it just not only does it serve the story and serve the representation in the film, but it also just serves to build out the world in an authentic way. So you get a feeling of the culture, and I would imagine a lot of the actors in this have real life historical, cultural, generational stories and trauma from different things that actually happened in this. They might have a lot of real understanding of what was going on. Let me just say that on February 17th in 1985, she was arrested in her home by DEA agents, and this is in Miami, and subsequently charged with conspiracy to manufacture, import, and distribute cocaine. The case went to trial in federal court in New York City, actually, where she was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years in prison. And while serving her sentence, she was charged with 3 additional counts of first-degree murder. They don't go into any of this really in the TV series. You sort of see her arrested, and then they flash forward, and you see her murdered.
Right.
So this is the part that they don't, they don't go into 15 years in prison.
No.
So you don't get that sense of it, actually. You don't get that feeling of what she was like when she came out, that she had just been in prison for 15 years. That's not something they really amplify. But while serving her sentence, she was charged with 3 additional counts of first-degree murder by the state of Florida, and the prosecution made a deal with one of Blanco's most trusted hitmen, Jorge Ayala, who agreed to testify that Blanco had ordered him to carry out the killings. Now, this is sort of addressed a little bit. Like, one of the things that memoir or true stories or autobiographies do in film, of course, is collapse time. So they collapse a lot of these things, and they kind of give you representations of the people that were in her life, like the men Kathy was talking about that really would have given their life for her henchmen, basically, the people she trusted most. So this Jorge guy was one of those, but he agreed to testify that Blanco had ordered him to carry out the killings. However, unfortunately, the case collapsed due to technicalities relating to a phone sex scandal between Jorge and 2 female secretaries. In this TV series, they enjoyed characterizing it like, he intentionally did the phone sex scandal to undermine himself so that he couldn't be used as a witness or whatever.
Yeah.
That feels a little, TV.
Yes. It worked out a little bit too perfectly.
Yeah, it was like, oh, like he's a real mastermind and did that, which it is a delightful thing to put in the series, because that just goes to show you the narrative that they were trying to portray as if they were all so smart. In 1998, Blanco pleaded guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 20 years in prison to run concurrently. So there's all that. In 2002, Blanco, a lifelong cigarette smoker, suffered a heart attack in prison.
The scene that...
She didn't die. She dies later by assassination.
Yeah, like 15 months after she gets out of prison. She
did have a heart attack in prison, though. Let me just finish this. And so that is the reason why, because you're hearing like 35 years to run concurrently. How did she ever get out? In 2004, in light of her frail health, she was granted a compassionate release from prison and deported back to Colombia because of that heart attack. That's how she got out. Go ahead.
Yeah, that scene towards the end where, I mean, I can say this because it's part of the true stories, where she finds out that her sons are all dead except for Michael.
Yeah.
That was a really moving scene.
It was a moving scene.
And just, again, you know, we know we're dealing with someone who's a complete psychopath, but we also know that psychopaths can also have a handful of people in their life that they're very protective over. They may not be able to fully love them away a neurotypical healthy person will, but I think what I loved so much about her performance is that she really rode that line in a very effective and realistic way. It wasn't this one-dimensional violent psychopath. Like that scene where she finds out and she's asking, you know, name by name if her sons are still alive, because they, you know, do that however many years later, and now she's got gray hair. That scene where the detective, and then the detective also layered, because the detective was like, she was out to kill her, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then she's like watching Griselda realize that her sons are dead. That whole moment for me was the most powerful part of the entire series, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's how they chose, you know, to represent that prison stay.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really well done, like you say, because instead of getting into a whole other arc of what prison was like for her, they just really showed what the aftermath of what she wrought was. It's like, this is the price. We're going to take your whole family.
So sad.
For the most part.
And then she just had to sit in that.
Yeah, and it was very moving. And also, most people who would have known anything about this case or had anything to do with Griselda would say, yeah, good.
Mm-hmm.
Because well-deserved all that loss, you know?
Oh, yeah, she killed everyone in her wake, including children. So
yes. So we can have some compassion, but...
As we say in psychotherapy, you can hold both.
Yep. It's a dialectic.
It is.
Well, that's what we say. But we also say...
Griselda Blanco with a
kill! I can't wait till we start doing little video clips, because I'm definitely going to videotape you singing.
My face?
Yeah, it's delightful.
Other than the Godmother, what was Blanco known as?
I don't know. A stone cold biatch.
Black Widow.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's got a different connotation, really.
Number 2. Who said the only man I was ever afraid of was a woman named Griselda Blanco?
Wasn't it that guy Jorge, her right-hand man? No?
No, it was actually Pablo Escobar.
Oh, yeah.
The drug lord himself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Number 3, Blanco's only surviving son, Michael Corleone Blanco, lost blank family members to the drug wars.
15.
22.
I was going to say all of them, which is probably true. But
yeah. What skill did Sophia have to learn to play Griselda?
Was it that walk thing?
No, she had to learn how to smoke a cigarette. She had never smoked a cigarette in her life, and then she's like chain smoking through the whole thing.
Yeah, she needed to look authentic, because cigarette smokers would...
I think she was saying that the director would come over to her house and he'd be like, all right, let's do it. Like he taught her how to smoke.
Yeah. Because cigarette smoking has a thing. Like, you can't look like a novice. People,
you can't.
It's like you just can't do it on a film. It looks ridiculous, and we've all seen actors do it.
Yeah, or hold a gun.
Yeah,
and you're like, God, you've never held a gun.
No,
okay,
please put them through the training.
The show was originally titled Blank, a reference to something seen, like a very memorable scene of,
I don't know,
Emerald.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
If you've seen the series, it'll make sense. But yeah, it would not have been as catchy. People would have been like, what?
Yeah, no, it's really important because the tack they take is her and her arc, and like I said, there is a piece of this that's very female empowerment type of, even if it's the morally black person, it's still very much about her. So yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
This has been an episode of Terror Talk. My name is Shannon,
And I'm Kathy. Sleep safe, everyone.